She was 72 when the last door she ever called home closed quietly behind her. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene, just the gentle click of a lock turning, soft but absolute, echoing louder in her heart than any scream ever could. Evelyn stood on the cracked concrete porch holding a faded suitcase, its corners fraying like the edges of her memories. Her grip on the handle was so fierce you'd think it carried her entire life. Perhaps it did. For a long moment, she didn't move. She only listened to the muffled voices behind the door. Melissa, Jason's voice came flatly from inside, emotionless like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. His wife hovered behind him, leaning against the hallway wall with that tight, victorious smile people wear when they've finally gotten what they wanted. "You can't stay here anymore, Mom," he said, not meeting her eyes. "We have our kids, bills, we can't carry you too." "I'm sorry." He didn't hug her. Melissa didn't say goodbye. No one asked if she was okay. The woman who once skipped her own dinners so Jason could afford college textbooks now stood unwanted, her presence reduced to an inconvenience they couldn't budget for. She turned and stepped off the porch, one foot then another, each movement deliberate and heavy, dragging her old brown suitcase behind her. Its wheels scraped the pavement in a hushed whisper, as if reminding her, "You're alone now." But what Jason didn't know, what no one in that house or on that quiet street knew, was that Evelyn wasn't just an old woman with nothing left. Tucked deep inside her weathered purse sat a debit card attached to an account holding $1.4 million. She didn't shed a tear when she left their home. Not when the July sun burned her face. Not when her legs trembled with fatigue halfway down Maple Avenue. Not when she sat down on a splintered bus stop bench, her back hunched, her purse clutched tight in her lap like a shield against the world that had forgotten her. Because she knew something no one else did. Evelyn hadn't been fired from her part-time job. She'd quietly resigned. After years of volunteering at the local church thrift store, sorting donations, lifting heavy boxes, carrying bags for families in need, her back began to fail. Her doctor warned her, another season of lifting, and her spine could be damaged beyond repair. So she stopped. When the pastor begged her to stay, she only smiled and said she needed rest. What she didn't say was that she was tired of surviving on borrowed strength. She had spent decades sacrificing everything for Jason. After his father died in a scaffolding collapse at a construction site, she'd cleaned motel rooms by dawn, scrubbed hospital floors by night. She bought used coats for herself, so he could buy chemistry books brand new. She skipped lunch shifts so she could attend his science fairs, clapping the loudest from the back row with blistered hands. She did it with pride. She did it with love. But what she never expected was that the hardest part of motherhood wasn't the giving up. It was what came after, the silence from the very person you built your world around. She'd known hunger before, known nights of counting coins under flickering kitchen bulbs she couldn't afford to replace. She'd known loneliness, but rejection from her own son, that was a pain that carved itself into her bones. Still, she didn't hate him. She couldn't. Instead, sitting on that cold bus bench, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded slip of paper, a deed, yellowed and fragile with time. 34 years ago, after her husband's funeral, the insurance payout arrived. Among the condolence letters and final notices was this: 40 acres of barren land left to him by an uncle no one remembered. Friends said it was worthless. Sell it off for a couple thousand, they advised. But Evelyn didn't. Every year, no matter how tight money got, she scraped together enough to pay the property tax, whispering to herself, just in case. Last autumn, a sharply dressed man arrived at the thrift store asking for her. He said he represented a renewable energy company. They were constructing a massive solar array and needed that precise strip of land. He named a number so large Evelyn felt dizzy. But she asked only one question: can this remain private? 3 weeks later, $1.4 million was quietly deposited into a trust she'd created in her late husband's name. To the world, she remained Miss Evelyn, frail lady in secondhand skirts, wearing a small apron on Sundays as she poured coffee after church service. But now, She carried peace where before there was only worry. That night, she didn't check into a hotel. She walked to a women's shelter instead. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to sit among those who wouldn't measure her worth by what she had. She shared her sandwiches with a young woman escaping violence. She listened to a grandmother weep for the daughter who never called. And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt something unexpected. Seen. The next morning, she visited a decaying cottage at the edge of town. Its porch sagged, paint peeled in long curling strips, wild weeds strangled the walkway. She paid cash. Within a month, under a discreet LLC, the cottage was reborn. Fresh siding, new windows, solar panels on the roof, and a thriving vegetable garden in the yard. But no one knew it belonged to her. And that was exactly how she wanted it. She didn't crave revenge. She didn't want Jason or Melissa to come crawling back out of guilt or greed. What Evelyn wanted was to create something no one would ever be thrown away from. So she did. She started small, volunteering at pantries, shelters, youth programs, asking quietly what they needed most, secretly paying for plumbing repairs, donating under names no one could trace. Until one day, she bought an old boarded-up community hall. She called it Evelyn's Table. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm, truly warm. A place where people who'd been forgotten found hot soup, clean cots, soft blankets, and a gentle presence, asking for nothing in return. Children played beneath murals of wildflowers. Elderly men shared chess games by the window. Young mothers cried quietly into mugs of peppermint tea, feeling safe enough to let their guard down. 2 years passed, and Evelyn's Table became more than a building. It became a heartbeat. Steam rose from kitchen vents each dawn, fragrant with garlic and onion. Volunteers arrived before sunrise to bake fresh bread. Every Friday evening, fairy lights twinkled through the windows as neighbors gathered for communal dinners. No ID required, no forms to fill, just come as you are. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Jason's life unraveled. First it was late fees on the mortgage. Then the bill stacked higher than his paycheck. He tried picking up warehouse shifts, driving food deliveries after midnight, selling his vintage guitar for rent. Nothing lasted. Melissa packed her bags one cold morning, taking their children without tears or drama. "I need stability," was all she said. Soon Jason found himself sleeping on an air mattress in a friend's basement, sharing stale ramen noodles with cockroaches scuttling across the cement floor. Shame sat in his chest like an iron weight. One drizzly afternoon, desperate to escape the damp chill, he ducked into the public library. At the front desk hung a flyer printed on cream paper, elegant script curling across the top. Evelyn's Table. Meals, shelter, community. No one left behind. He froze. The logo, a small carved wooden table, stirred something in him he couldn't place. He read the address again and again. His pulse thundered in his ears. The next morning, with nothing left but frayed hope, he walked across town. Rain soaked his thin jacket as he trudged along cracked sidewalks. When he arrived, he saw it. A modest building painted a soft peach color, framed by wild daisies and sunflowers taller than any child's head. Laughter drifted through the open windows. Steam curled from the kitchen vent, and above the front door, carved into a wooden plank, were the words, "Evelyn's Table. Everyone has a place." He stepped inside. Warmth hit him instantly, not just from the heaters, but from the atmosphere itself, humming with kindness. The smell of rosemary bread, the gentle murmur of volunteers setting out bowls. People moved quietly, purposefully, like they belonged. Behind a reception counter sat a woman in a beige cardigan, her silver hair neatly pinned behind her ears. She looked up. Her eyes widened when she saw him, but she didn't flinch. Jason stood frozen. His lips trembled. For a moment, he was 5 years old again, clinging to her apron as she stirred soup over the old stove. I didn't know where else to go," he whispered. Evelyn rose slowly, her joints stiff but her resolve strong. She walked around the counter, stopping inches from him. Jason lowered his gaze, tears welling in his eyes. "I lost the house," he stammered. "Melissa's gone. I I have nothing. Silence settled between them. Then, her voice, soft and unwavering. Come inside, she said, resting a gentle hand on his forearm. You look cold. She guided him to a small wooden table, set down a steaming mug of chamomile tea before him. He wrapped his hands around it, as if he could soak up its heat into his weary bones. This place, he said hoarsely, looking around at the mural-covered walls, the baskets of fresh produce, the shelves lined with donated books. It's yours. She nodded. Tears blurred his vision. I thought you had nothing, he choked out. She smiled faintly. I had peace, she replied. And enough. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Why didn't you say you were okay, that you had this? She looked at him with eyes that had once watched him sleep, feverish and small under Mickey Mouse bedsheets. Eyes that had known hope and betrayal and forgiveness in equal measure. Would it have changed anything? She asked softly. He didn't answer. His throat closed with regret. I needed to know, she continued, her voice breaking a little, who would stand by me when I had nothing to give. That's how I knew who to build this place for. Tears slid down his cheeks as his shoulders shook. I was awful to you, he whispered. You trusted me, and I threw you away. She reached out and covered his hand with hers. Her skin was paper thin, her veins like pale rivers, but her grip was steady. You forgot yourself, she said gently. That doesn't mean you can't find your way back. And in that quiet moment, Jason wept, not with dramatic sobs, but with silent tears that carried years of shame, sorrow, and a fragile new hope. For the first time in his adult life, he felt something shift inside him, a flicker of the boy he used to be. Spring came slow that year, the earth awakening with shy buds and gentle rains. Jason began showing up at Evelyn's table each dawn. He fixed broken chairs, sorted canned food donations, helped patch roof leaks. He didn't ask to be paid. He came because each act felt like redemption. Evelyn never lectured him. She didn't need to. Every Friday evening they sat together on the cottage porch, watching the children chase fireflies through the vegetable garden. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. The silence between them felt sacred. One evening, Evelyn handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was the original deed to the house he lost, along with the voided check from the land she sold, framed together under glass. Jason looked up at her, stunned in his silence. You don't owe me anything, she said softly. But now you know what happens when love comes before pride. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because for the first time, he saw her. Not as a burden. Not as the woman who used to iron his uniforms or bake his birthday cakes. But as a whole person, a woman who had been broken and still chose compassion over revenge. That autumn, Evelyn passed away quietly in her sleep. No headlines mark her passing. No grand tributes. Just a simple memorial service under the maple trees behind Evelyn's table. More than 100 people came. Families, volunteers, neighbors, strangers. Each one carrying a story of how she'd quietly saved them. Jason stood by the wooden casket, holding the apron she used to wear while stirring soup at the old thrift store kitchen. He cleared his throat, his voice trembling as he spoke. My mother left the house once with nothing but a battered suitcase and her quiet heart. But in that silence, she built something bigger than any of us ever knew. He turned towards the doorway of Evelyn's table. Above it, carved into the wooden arch, were her final words to the world. The doors that close behind you can never match the ones you open for others. Jason, once angry, once lost, finally became the man his mother always believed he could be. Not because she left him money, not because she rescued him, but because, even in her last days, Evelyn chose forgiveness over pride and love over revenge.